Greetings, Indie Warriors, and welcome to I Dream of Indie. My name's Ole Gamer Joe, here with some quick early impressions of Almighty Kill Your Gods, an action RPG that has just entered Steam Early Access. The game takes place in the realm of a nun where roam the Kuna nun, who were born from wolves, and they are now under attack by mighty gods, at least at the beginning of the game. That's the initial setup. They fight back against these gods and are eventually successful in doing so. This leads to the Kuna nun annihilating all of the gods, eventually evolving into more powerful creatures and creating a golden age known as the Apex Alpha. Unfortunately, thinking that they are almighty rulers after all, the Kuna nun get a little bit lax and they forget about the general rules of survival. With new dangers on the horizon, they are now relying on an alpha hunter, and that's where you, the player, come in. From here, you choose between two different forms, and it's not exactly apparent what the difference is between these forms. They appear to have a different stance from one another, but the game doesn't really describe that too well. Almighty Kill Your Gods then drops you into the tutorial of the game, which doesn't take too long to complete, but do be careful here because my co-op partner friend, unfortunately, exited the game or something like that, and when he returned, the tutorial was no longer available, so you can miss out on the tutorial. Thankfully, later on, there are menus to explain all the different controls, but it's just something to be aware of. Right now, in this early access build, there was no native controller support, unfortunately, so I was getting button prompts that represented my keyboard. That's something to be aware of. You can play with a controller. It will automatically map the keyboard controls to that controller, but it's not always ideal, and it's a little bit confusing to play that way, so I found myself having to switch between keyboard controls and regular controller. Eventually, I just gave up and tried to do my best on the keyboard and mouse. Anyways, though, assuming you don't get locked out of the tutorial, you will learn to sprint, which looks pretty rad, I must admit. You can double jump and float for a bit afterwards. You have a standard attack and sprinting attack, which helps you to quickly bash through pillars and enemies, and then a spin and airborne attack as well. I must admit, it's pretty cool to jump up into the air and then bash right down into foes. That ended up being my favorite of the attacks. But you do also have some magic, which is attached to the trigger buttons. You can use two different forms of attacking this way. Your right hand is a spell that's more of a quick fire, and your left hand can be defensive or more of a charge-up attack. As you'll learn, there's quite a bit of different equipment that you're going to come across throughout the game, so it really depends what you're wearing, what spells and abilities that you'll have. You do also have a charge-up attack, which allows you to unleash more melee damage, so that's nice for when you're dealing with enemies close range, though I don't always recommend fighting them that way. After working my way through the tutorial, I come to find out that my island has been attacked and destroyed by elder gods. Dead bodies everywhere. This game does a really good job of showing you some pretty cool and gnarly cutscenes from time to time. I do have to give it credit there. And then you're whisked into the main action. So then you'll see that you have a health bar and then a stamina magic bar. These will deplete over time. Obviously, if you take damage, your health is going down, but you'll have to use your magic sparingly or give it a moment to recharge. It doesn't take too long though. Initially, I wasn't feeling the combat in this one too much, to be honest with you, but I was relying more on close-range attacks. Once I realized that I should get further away from my enemies, blast away at them that way, I started to enjoy it a bit more. There is a little bit of strategy to it, and while it doesn't always feel great thanks to the game's current wonky performance, I did ultimately end up having some fun with this combat system. A lot of the early tasks in this game have you either killing a group of enemies or rescuing people, but eventually the missions do open up and there's a bit more variety. Once you find the prayer wall in this game, which is more or less the central hub of this island, you'll learn about the other missions that you can take on and how your statistics are doing and how your overall completion rate in the game is going. You'll also realize that you'll be building up this island. There are various shops that you'll need to unlock using the resources and experience that you've gained along the way on your missions. At the center of this island is a massive tower, and you'll be able to build more and more floors onto that. So yeah, there is a building element to this game. You're getting stronger and stronger that way. I quite enjoyed it. And that's more or less what you'll be doing for the first hour or so of Almighty. You have a few missions to go through, defeating enemies, of course, collecting some different crafting elements and that kind of thing, and eventually getting onto your first hunt. This is where you can actually co-op along with a friend. This is not a turn your brain off RPG. There are systems to be learned, there's lots of upgrading to be done, and it's deeper than it initially looks or seems. Unfortunately, the performance of this game is not quite up to snuff yet. I was experiencing a lot of frame rate drops even on a 2070 Super playing at 1080p. I did try to mess with different resolutions and settings, but to no avail. Plenty of frame drops along the way here, and that was disappointing. My co-op partner also ran into a glitch where no enemies were appearing and he couldn't complete a mission, so we didn't even get to test the co-op features out yet. That's a shame because I do think the overall combat engine is fun enough, and the collecting loot and getting stronger is entertaining, and the hunts would be a lot of fun with co-op partners. You can apparently have up to 4 in this game. So that was a letdown that I didn't get to test that out just yet, but again, I've only played about an hour or so of the game, and I'll certainly give it another go eventually. But onto the visual style of this game in general, I think it looks alright. Some of the textures seem pretty low, some of the open areas are covered in fog, the draw distance isn't always great, but I like the overall art style of the game. I think that your lead character looks pretty cool, and so do some of the enemies. There is one part of Almighty that I can't complain about whatsoever, and that's the sound design. I think the sound effects are very satisfying here, the voice acting is really great in the cutscenes, and I think the musical tracks are also really well done. There's some rocking tunes in the beginning that I thought were effective, and some good drum beats as well, very ancient sounding. I enjoyed the overall audio design. Overall, it's an early access game, a bit of a technical mess at the moment, but I see a lot of potential in this one. It's definitely a game that you'll want to keep an eye on if you like action RPGs. I could really see the hunts being a ton of fun with up to 4 players. Right now, I can't fully recommend jumping in just because of those performance issues unless you really want to support a game in early access. I would say give this one at least a few weeks or a month before jumping in, just because it is so rough in spots, but I know the developers are working hard to keep updating the game, so cautiously optimistic about this one. Do be prepared for some glitches and other issues, but if you want to jump in, the game is available now on Steam Early Access. And yeah, this is why we don't review early access games here. I prefer integrity over slapping a review label on something that's not yet fully complete. Thanks so much for watching the latest video from I Dream of Indie. We'd now like to take a moment to thank our great indie warriors who support us through channel memberships: Mitchell Hall, Kevilo, Bunny, Bill Tikaz, Christian Cruz, Strict9, Rosie Syntax, Chris Jackson, Nathan Moore, Peach, Adriana Amato, CJR, Jesse, Falco Lombardi, Wesley William Semple, C. Coyle, and Skepticism. Thank you for all you do for independent games, the developers and publishers, and for I Dream of Indie. Be sure to check out the brand new idreamofindie.com for everything you need to know about us, or head down to the description box below and help us bring a voice to the voiceless ones in gaming.